The rain hammered against the grimy windows of the small restaurant in Itaewon, each drop a staccato beat that matched the pounding of Min-soo's heart. He stood frozen in the doorway, water dripping from his black cashmere coat onto the worn linoleum floor, his hand still gripping the door handle. The bodyguards behind him shifted uncomfortably, waiting for their boss to move, but Min-soo couldn't. He physically couldn't. Because there she was. Binta moved between the tables with a practiced efficiency that spoke of months, maybe years, of doing this work. Her dark skin glistened with a sheen of sweat despite the autumn chill, and her hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail that swayed as she balanced 3 steaming bowls of kimchi jjigae on her arms. She wore the standard uniform of the establishment, a faded red apron over a white shirt that strained across her midsection. Her very pregnant midsection. Min-soo felt the air leave his lungs as if someone had punched him in the solar plexus. 7 months. It had been exactly 7 months since he'd watched her walk out of his penthouse, her eyes dry of tears because she'd already cried them all. 7 months since he'd made the choice that destroyed them both. 7 months since he'd chosen the Beek crime family over the only person who'd ever made him want to be something other than what he was. And now she was here, carrying what could only be. "Boss," Young-ho, his second-in-command, touched his elbow. "Should we go somewhere else?" Min-soo's jaw clenched. "No!" The word came out sharp, final. He couldn't leave, not now, not when the universe had thrown her back into his path like this. He moved into the restaurant, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere. People knew who he was, or at least, they knew enough to understand that a man in a $10,000 coat flanked by stone-faced men in suits was someone you didn't stare at. Conversations dropped to whispers. The elderly owner behind the counter bowed so deeply Min-soo thought the man might break in half. But Binta hadn't noticed him yet. She was at a table by the window, setting down the bowls with a smile that made Min-soo's chest ache. That smile. He'd spent a year of his life trying to earn that smile, and when he finally did, it had been like the sun breaking through clouds. Now she gave it away freely to strangers who probably didn't even tip well. "Table for 4, Min-soo said, his voice carrying across the small space. That's when Binta turned. Her smile died instantly. The color drained from her face, and for a horrible moment, Min-soo thought she might faint. Her hand went instinctively to her belly, protective, maternal, and something in that gesture made his heart twist so violently he almost gasped. "Binta." Her name left his lips before he could stop it, soft and broken in a way that Min-soo, the crime boss, never allowed himself to sound. She recovered quickly, her spine straightening, her chin lifting in that defiant way he remembered so well. "We're very busy," she said, her accent still thick, still beautiful. "Maybe you try another restaurant." The owner scurried over, bowing and scraping. No, we have table. Best table for Mr. Beek." Min-soo saw the flash of pain cross Binta's face at the name. Beek. Not Choi, his birth name. Beek, the name of the family that had taken him in when his own parents had gambled away their lives and left him with nothing but debt. The name that came with power, with territory, with blood on his hands that could never wash clean. The name that had cost him everything. "I'll take that table," Min-soo said, not breaking eye contact with Binta. "And she'll be our server." "I'm not," Binta started, but the owner was already nodding frantically. Yes, Binta, you take care of Mr. Beek. Give him best service." For a moment, Min-soo thought she would refuse, would throw her apron in the owner's face and walk out. But then he saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. Resignation. Exhaustion. The look of someone who couldn't afford to lose this job, no matter what it cost her emotionally. Because of the baby, because she was alone. Because of him. She led them to a corner table, moving carefully, one hand supporting her lower back. Min-soo noticed every detail, the slight swelling of her ankles above her practical shoes, the way she breathed a little harder than she should, the protective curve of her palm over her belly. She was at least 7 months along, maybe 8. The timing. "What do you want?" she asked flatly, pulling out her notepad. What did he want? He wanted to turn back time. He wanted to tell his uncle to go to hell when the old man had given him the ultimatum, the family or the girl. He wanted to have been stronger, braver, better. He wanted to have chosen love over loyalty, her over everything. But time only moved forward, and Min-soo had made his choice. Is it mine? The question escaped before his carefully constructed control could cage it. Binta's eyes flashed. Your what? Your soup, your rice. Be specific, Mr. Beak. The baby. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, aware of his men at the table, aware of the other diners trying not to obviously eavesdrop. Is the baby mine? She laughed, but it was a bitter, hollow sound. You want bibimbap or bulgogi? Kitchen closes in 1 hour. Binta. I am not discussing this with you. Her voice shook slightly, the only crack in her armor. You want food, I bring food. You want anything else, you leave. Min-soo leaned back, studying her face. She'd lost weight everywhere except her belly. Her cheeks were hollower, her collarbones more prominent. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She was working herself to exhaustion in her condition, and the thought made rage simmer in his gut. 4 bulgogi, he said quietly, and soup, whatever you recommend. She wrote it down mechanically and turned to leave, but Min-soo's hand shot out, catching her wrist gently. She froze. Let me go, she said, her voice tight. Are you taking care of yourself? That's none of your business. Everything about you is my business. She yanked her hand free, her eyes blazing. You gave up that right when you chose your family over me, when you told me I could never be part of your world because I'm not Korean, when you said, her voice cracked, and she pressed her lips together hard, when you said loving me was a mistake you couldn't afford. Each word was a knife between his ribs. Min-soo had said all of that and worse, had tried to make her hate him because he thought it would be easier for her to leave if she did. His uncle had been clear. The Beak family would never accept a foreign woman, especially not a black woman, as the wife of the heir. The old guard was traditional, racist, and absolutely inflexible. Min-soo had tried to fight it, had tried to find a way, but in the end, he'd been a coward. He'd let her go. I was wrong, he said now, the words feeling inadequate and huge all at once. You were honest, Binta corrected coldly. Now you excuse me, I have work. She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into the kitchen. Min-soo's men exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. Young-ho cleared his throat. Boss, maybe we should. Shut up. Min-soo pulled out his phone and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. I need information on someone, he said quietly. Everything. Where she lives, where she works, her medical records, financial situation, everything. And I need it in 2 hours. He gave Binta's full name and hung up. If she wouldn't tell him what he needed to know, he'd find out himself. If that baby was his, and every instinct he had screamed that it was, then everything changed. Everything. Binta returned 20 minutes later with their food, her face carefully blank. She set the dishes down with practiced efficiency, avoiding Min-soo's gaze. But as she reached across to place the soup in front of Young-ho, she winced, her hand flying to her side. Min-soo was on his feet instantly. What's wrong? Nothing, just, she winced again, breathing through her teeth. Just baby kicking, sits on my ribs sometimes. The casual way she said it, like she was used to dealing with this alone, like she'd gotten used to having no one to share these moments with, made something crack open in Min-soo's chest. Sit down, he ordered, pulling out the chair next to him. I can't, I'm working. Sit down. The command in his voice was absolute, the voice of a man used to being obeyed. To his surprise, she did, more out of exhaustion than compliance, he suspected. Up close, she looked even more tired, and Min-soo caught the faint tremor in her hands as she rubbed her side. When was your last doctor's appointment? He asked. Why do you care? Binta. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, he placed his hand over hers. Her skin was warm, familiar, and the contact sent electricity through him. When? She looked down at their joined hands, and he saw the moment her resolve weakened. 2 weeks ago, everything is fine. Baby is healthy. Boy or girl? A pause. Boy. A son. He was going to have a son. The knowledge settled into Min-soo's bones like truth, like destiny. He didn't need a paternity test to know. The timing was right, and more than that, he could feel it. The same way he'd felt the first time he saw Binta across a crowded club, the same way he'd known she would change everything. "I want to help," he said quietly. "I don't need your help. You're working yourself to exhaustion while heavily pregnant. You clearly need." "What I need," Binta interrupted, pulling her hand away, "is for you to finish your food and leave. I'm doing fine. We're doing fine." She stood up, straightening her apron. "We don't need you, Min-soo. We don't need the Beek family or their money or their—" The front door crashed open. 3 men burst in, and Min-soo recognized them immediately. H-Wang crew, rivals from Gangnam who'd been pushing into Beek territory for months. The leader, a scarred thug named Do-yeon, had a gun in his hand. Time slowed down. Min-soo saw Young-ho reaching for his weapon, saw the other diners screaming and diving under tables, saw the restaurant owner frozen behind the counter. But most of all, he saw Binta, standing right in the line of fire, her eyes wide with terror, her hands instinctively wrapping around her pregnant belly. "Well, well," Do-yeon sneered, raising his gun. "Min-soo Beek, didn't expect to find you in a shithole like this." His eyes slid to Binta and his smile widened. "With a pregnant bitch, too, yours." Everything in Min-soo went cold and deadly. "Put the gun down, Do-yeon. This doesn't have to." "Doesn't have to what? End badly," Do-yeon laughed. "Your uncle killed my brother last month. Did you know that? Shot him in the head over a territory dispute. So yeah, this is absolutely going to end badly." He aimed the gun directly at Binta. Min-soo moved without thinking, his body acting on pure instinct. He lunged forward, putting himself between Binta and the gun, just as Do-yeon pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the small space. Min-soo felt the impact, a sledgehammer to his left shoulder that spun him around. He hit the table hard, dishes crashing to the floor. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Binta screaming his name, heard more gunshots as his men returned fire, heard the chaos of people running and glass breaking. But all he could focus on was Binta's face above him, her hands pressing against his shoulder, his blood, pooling between her fingers. "Stay with me," she was saying, tears streaming down her face. "Min-soo, stay with me, please, please." He tried to tell her it was okay, that he'd be fine, but his vision was already darkening at the edges. The last thing he saw before consciousness slipped away was Binta's terrified face and her hands, covered in his blood, cradling her pregnant belly. Their son. His son. Then everything went black. The antiseptic smell of the hospital hit Binta like a physical force, dragging her back to another time, another emergency room, another life. Her hands were still shaking as she scrubbed Min-soo's blood from beneath her fingernails in the bathroom sink, watching the water run pink, then clear. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her distress, and she pressed a hand to her belly, whispering soothing words in her native Wolof, words her own mother had whispered to her as a child. "We're okay," she told her son. "We're going to be okay." But she didn't know if that was true. 3 hours had passed since the shooting. 3 hours since she'd watched Min-soo collapse, since she'd screamed for someone to call an ambulance, since she'd ridden with him to the hospital despite Young-ho's protests. 3 hours of packing, of nurses telling her nothing, of her mind replaying the moment the gun went off again and again. He'd taken a bullet for her, for their baby. The man who'd broken her heart, who told her she could never be part of his world, had thrown himself in front of a gun without hesitation. Binta dried her hands and stepped out of the bathroom, nearly colliding with Young-ho. Min-soo's second-in-command had been watching her like a hawk since they arrived, his expression unreadable but his presence oppressive. 4 other Beek men stood guard around the private waiting room they'd commandeered, their suits immaculate despite the violence they'd just survived. "You should go home," Young-ho said, not unkindly. "We'll contact you when there's news." "I'm not leaving." "Miss Dilo." "It's Mrs. Choi," Binta corrected sharply, then immediately regretted it. That name didn't belong to her anymore. She'd gone back to her maiden name the day she'd left Min-soo, had spent 7 months trying to erase every trace of the brief, beautiful period when she'd believed love could conquer anything. How naive she'd been. Young-ho's expression softened slightly. He never filed the divorce papers. Binta's head snapped up. What? The papers you signed. He kept them in his desk drawer, never submitted them. Young-ho shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to discussing his boss's personal matters. I found them last month when I was looking for something else. They were in an envelope with... He trailed off, seeming to debate whether to continue. With photos of you, a lot of photos. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Binta's feet. 7 months. For 7 months she'd believed she was divorced, had tried to build a new life as a single mother, had taught herself to stop loving a man who'd chosen his criminal empire over her. And he'd never even filed the papers. Why are you telling me this? She whispered. Because you deserve to know that letting you go destroyed him. Young-ho met her eyes steadily. I've known Min-soo since we were teenagers, since before the Beeks took him in. I've never seen him care about anything the way he cared about you. When you left, he shook his head. He became someone else, colder, more ruthless, like he was trying to prove he didn't need anyone. Then why didn't he fight for me? The question burst out of Binta before she could stop it. 7 months of hurt and confusion and anger pouring into those 7 words. Why did he just let me go? Because his uncle gave him an ultimatum. A new voice cut through the waiting room, cold and sharp as a blade. Binta turned to see an elderly Korean man entering, flanked by 2 bodyguards who made Young-ho's team look like amateurs. He was impeccably dressed in a traditional hanbok, his silver hair swept back from a face that might have been handsome once, but was now carved into harsh lines by decades of violence and power. This, she knew instantly, was Baek Joon-ho, the patriarch of the Baek crime family and the man who'd raised Min-soo from the age of 15. The man who'd told Min-soo to get rid of her. Uncle, Young-ho said, bowing deeply. The other men in the room followed suit. Binta didn't bow. She stood straight, her hand protective over her belly, meeting the old man's gaze without flinching. She'd spent too long in Korea to be ignorant of the disrespect this showed, but she was done bowing to men who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle. Baek Joon-ho's eyes narrowed as he took her in, her dark skin, her pregnant belly, her defiant stance. So, he said in Korean, you're the foreign woman who's been distracting my nephew. I speak Korean, Binta replied in flawless Seoul dialect, satisfaction flickering through her at his slight surprise. And I'm not distracting anyone. I haven't seen Min-soo in 7 months. Yet here you are, in the hospital where my nephew lies bleeding because he was stupid enough to put himself between you and a bullet. Baek Joon-ho stepped closer, and despite her resolve, Binta felt a chill run down her spine. This man had ordered deaths the way other people ordered coffee. That baby you're carrying, it's his, isn't it? There was no point in lying. Yes. And you didn't tell him. I had no reason to. He made it very clear that I had no place in his life. Because I told him to end it, Baek Joon-ho said bluntly. Because a Baek family heir cannot have a foreign wife, cannot have mixed-race children who will never be accepted by our world. I gave Min-soo a choice, you or his position as my successor. He chose correctly. Each word was designed to wound, and they did. But Binta had spent 7 months building armor around her heart, had survived racism and isolation and the crushing weight of single motherhood in a foreign country. She wouldn't let this old man break her. If he chose correctly, she said quietly, then why didn't he file the divorce papers? Why does he keep photos of me in his desk? Why did he take a bullet for me tonight? For the first time, something like uncertainty flickered across Baek Joon-ho's face. What do you mean, he didn't file the papers? I mean, we're still married, Binta said, the words tasting strange on her tongue. Legally, I'm still Mrs. Choi Min-soo, which means that baby I'm carrying, your only nephew's only child, that baby is the legitimate heir to everything Min-soo has. The silence that followed was deafening. Young-ho had gone pale, and the other men in the room exchanged shocked glances. Baek Joon-ho's face had turned to stone, but Binta could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. She just changed the entire power structure of the Beek family with a few simple words. "You're lying," he said finally. "Check for yourself. I signed the papers 7 months ago. Min-soo never filed them." Binta felt her baby kick again, as if agreeing with her. "I didn't know until 5 minutes ago, but it doesn't change the facts. In the eyes of the law, I'm his wife. This baby is his legitimate son, and if something happens to Min-soo tonight..." She let the implication hang in the air. If Min-soo died, his assets would go to his legal wife and child. Not to the Beek family, not to his uncle, to her. Beek Junho's hand twitched toward his jacket, and for a terrifying moment, Binta thought he might actually pull a gun on her. But Jungho stepped between them, his body language respectful but firm. "Uncle, please. The police are already investigating the shooting. If anything happens to Mrs. Choi, there will be questions we can't answer." The old man's jaw clenched, but he stepped back. "This conversation isn't over," he said to Binta. "You think you're clever, using your pregnancy as a shield, but you have no idea what you've walked into. The Beek family doesn't negotiate with outsiders." "I'm not negotiating," Binta said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I'm just telling you the truth. What you do with that information is up to you." Before Beek Junho could respond, a doctor in blue scrubs pushed through the waiting room doors. "Family of Choi Min-soo." Everyone turned. Binta's heart stopped. "I'm his wife," she said, stepping forward before anyone else could speak. "Is he alive?" The doctor nodded. "He's alive. The bullet missed all major organs, but he's lost a significant amount of blood. We've managed to stop the bleeding and remove the bullet. He's in recovery now, but..." The doctor hesitated, glancing at the roomful of obviously dangerous men. "He's stable but unconscious. It's hard to say when he'll wake up." Relief and fear warred in Binta's chest. "Can I see him?" "Family only. Immediate family." "She's his wife," Jungho said firmly, "and that's his child she's carrying." The doctor looked uncertain but nodded. "Follow me, but only you," he said to Binta. "The rest of you will have to wait." Binta followed the doctor down a sterile hallway, acutely aware of Beek Junho's eyes burning into her back. The old man had looked at her like she was a problem to be solved, and men like him had very permanent solutions to problems. But she couldn't think about that now. The private room was dim, lit only by the glow of monitors and the soft lights above the bed. Min-soo lay motionless, his golden skin pale against the white sheets, an IV in his arm and bandages wrapped around his shoulder and chest. He looked younger like this, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen him even in their most intimate moments. Binta sank into the chair beside his bed, her hand finding his instinctively. His fingers were cool, and she wrapped both her hands around them, trying to warm them. "You're such an idiot," she whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Why did you do that? Why did you jump in front of that gun?" She knew he couldn't hear her, but the words poured out anyway. "You broke my heart, Min-soo. You told me I wasn't enough, that I could never be enough. You let me leave. You let me think you didn't want me anymore." Her son kicked, and she guided Min-soo's hand to her belly, pressing his palm against the place where their child moved. "This is your son," she told him. "Your son who you'll never meet if you don't wake up. He kicks all the time now. He's strong, stubborn like his father." She sat like that for hours, talking to Min-soo about everything and nothing. About the pregnancy, about the names she'd been considering, about how she'd found the restaurant job, about how scared she'd been when she realized she was pregnant and alone. The nurses came and went, checking vitals and adjusting medications, but they left her alone otherwise. It was nearly dawn when Min-soo's fingers twitched against her belly. Binta's breath caught. "Min-soo." His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they found her face. "Binta," he rasped, his voice rough from the breathing tube they'd removed. "You're here." "Where else would I be, you idiot?" She wiped at her tears angrily. "You took a bullet for me." "For both of you." His eyes dropped to where his hand still rested on her pregnant belly, and something profound shifted in his expression. Wonder, love, and a fierce protectiveness that made Binta's heart clench. "My son." "Yes." "You should have told me." There was no accusation in his voice, only sadness. 7 months, Binta. You were alone for 7 months. You told me to leave. You said. I was wrong. Min-soo's grip on her hand tightened. About everything, I thought letting you go would keep you safe. I thought if I made you hate me, if I pushed you away, you could have a normal life. Away from this world, away from the violence and the danger and the... He broke off, coughing. Don't talk, Binta said, reaching for the water cup. You need to rest. No, he struggled to sit up, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. I need to tell you this. I need you to know that every day for the last 7 months has been hell, that I never filed the divorce papers because I couldn't, that I love you, Binta. I've always loved you. I was just too much of a coward to fight for you when it mattered. The words she'd dreamed of hearing for 7 months should have felt like victory. Instead, they felt like salt in a wound that had never fully healed. Love isn't enough, she said quietly. Your uncle made that clear. This world, your world, there's no place in it for someone like me, for a black woman with a mixed baby. You think love will change that. You think your family will suddenly accept us because you took a bullet. I don't care if they accept you or not. Min-soo's eyes blazed with an intensity that made her breath catch. I'm done choosing them over you. I'm done being who they want me to be. What does that mean? It means I'm leaving the Beek family. Binta stared at him. You can't just leave. That's not how this works. Your uncle. My uncle gave me an ultimatum once and I chose wrong. Now I'm choosing right. Min-soo brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. I'm choosing you, Binta. You and our son. Whatever that means, whatever I have to give up, I'm choosing you. It was everything she'd wanted to hear. Everything she'd dreamed about during lonely nights in her tiny apartment, rubbing her growing belly and wondering what if. But Binta had learned the hard way that dreams and reality were very different things. They won't let you just walk away, she said. You know too much. You're too important to them. Then we'll run. We'll leave Korea, go anywhere you want. Africa, Europe, America. I don't want to run. The words burst out of Binta with more force than she'd intended. I'm tired of running, Min-soo. I ran from Senegal to France for university. I ran from France to Korea for a job. I ran from you when you pushed me away. I'm tired of running, and I won't raise our son to be a fugitive, always looking over his shoulder, always afraid. Then what do you want? What did she want? The question was harder than it should have been. She wanted the fairy tale, wanted love to conquer all, wanted Min-soo to sweep her into his arms and make everything okay. But she was 30 years old and 7 months pregnant and too damn tired for fairy tales. I want honesty, she said finally. No more secrets, no more half-truths. I want to know exactly what we're facing if we try to make this work. Min-soo nodded slowly. Okay, the truth is that my uncle will never accept you as my wife. The old guard, the men who run the family with him, they see you as a threat to the bloodline, to tradition. If I stay in the family and stay with you, there will be attempts on your life, on our son's life. They'll see him as a weakness to exploit or an abomination to eliminate. Each word was a hammer blow, but Binta didn't flinch. And if you leave? If I leave, I lose everything, my position, my power, my wealth. But more than that, I become a loose end. Someone who knows too much and can't be trusted. They'll hunt us. Maybe not right away, but eventually. So we're trapped, Binta said bitterly. Stay and face constant danger, or leave and face constant pursuit. There's a third option. Something in Min-soo's voice made Binta look up sharply. His expression had changed, hardened into something calculating and dangerous. The face of the crime boss, not the wounded lover. What option? We take over. Binta laughed, then realized he was serious. You're insane. The bullet must have scrambled your brain. Think about it, Min-soo said, his eyes gleaming. My uncle is old, and the family's leadership is fracturing. The younger generation doesn't want to follow the old ways anymore. The H-Wang crew's attack tonight proves we're vulnerable. If I challenge my uncle now, while he's weak. He's not weak, he's terrifying. He's scared, Min-soo corrected. Young-ho told you about the papers, didn't he? About how I kept them. At Binta's nod, he continued. My uncle knows. He's known for months that I couldn't let you go, that I was weak. That's why he's been undermining me, why he's been grooming other potential heirs. He sees me as compromised." "You are compromised," Binta pointed out. "You just took a bullet for me." "Exactly, and now everyone knows it. Everyone knows that the cold, ruthless Min-soo Beek has a weakness." He smiled grimly. "So we make that weakness into strength. We show them that my foreign wife is an asset, not a liability. We show them that our son represents the future, a bridge between the old Korea and the new, between tradition and progress." "You're talking about a coup." "I'm talking about survival, ours and our sons." Min-soo's hand pressed against her belly again, and she felt their baby kick against his palm. "I can't promise it will be safe. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise that I will fight for you this time, for us, with everything I have." Binta wanted to say yes. Every cell in her body wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this time would be different. But she'd been burned before, and the stakes were so much higher now. "I need time," she said, "to think too." The door burst open. Young-ho stood there, his face ashen. "Boss, we have a problem. The H-Wang crew, they just hit one of our warehouses in Gangnam, killed 6 of our men and made off with 2 million in product." Min-soo tried to sit up, swearing when pain lanced through his shoulder. "How many of them?" "A dozen, maybe more. They're getting bold, hitting us while you're down." Young-ho's eyes flicked to Binta, then back to Min-soo. "Your uncle is calling an emergency council meeting. He wants you there in 3 hours. "I can't even stand," Min-soo said through gritted teeth. "Then he'll call the meeting without you. And if you're not there—" Young-ho didn't need to finish the sentence. If Min-soo wasn't there to defend his position, Baek Joon-ho would use his absence to strip him of power entirely. Binta saw the calculation in Min-soo's eyes, saw the moment he made his decision. He would go to that meeting even if it killed him, because not going meant losing everything. "Help me up," he told Young-ho. "Min-soo, no," Binta protested. "You've been shot, you need to rest." "If I rest, I lose. If I lose, we all lose." He met her eyes, and she saw the truth there. This was the world he lived in, where showing weakness even for a moment could be fatal. "I have to go." Young-ho and another guard helped Min-soo to his feet, supporting him as he swayed. Blood had already begun to seep through his bandages, but he gritted his teeth and stayed upright. "Come with me," he said to Binta. "What?" "To the meeting, come with me." When she started to shake her head, he pressed on. "You said you wanted honesty, wanted to know exactly what we're facing. Then see it. See my world, see what I'm asking you to be part of, and then decide." It was a test, Binta realized. Not of her, but of himself. He was showing her the ugliest parts of his life, daring her to accept them or walk away for good. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, expecting a text from her worried coworker. Instead, it was an unknown number with a photo attachment. Her blood turned to ice. The photo showed her apartment building, showed her walking in yesterday, pregnant belly clearly visible, and written across the image in Korean were 4 words that made her heart stop. "We know where you live." She looked up at Min-soo, and from his expression, she knew he'd seen the fear on her face. "What is it?" Wordlessly, she showed him the phone. Min-soo's face went from concerned to absolutely murderous in the space of a heartbeat. He showed the phone to Young-ho, who swore viciously. "The H-Wang crew," Young-ho said. "They must have been watching the restaurant, saw you leave with us." "They're threatening her to get to me," Min-soo said, his voice deadly calm in a way that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. "They're threatening my wife and my unborn child." Another text came through. "The foreign whore and her half-breed bastard for your territory in Itaewon. You have 24 hours to decide." Binta felt Min-soo's whole body go rigid. When he spoke, his voice could have frozen fire. "Young-ho, get me a car, get me clothes. Get me to that council meeting." "Boss, you're in no condition." "Now." Young-ho hurried out. Min-soo turned to Binta, and she saw in his eyes something she'd never seen before. Not love, not anger, but absolute lethal purpose. "You asked what I want," he said quietly. I want to burn them all to the ground. Every single person who thinks they can threaten you, threaten our son. I want to make an example so brutal, so complete, that no one ever dares to touch my family again. Min-soo. But I can't do that if you're not with me. I can't protect you if you walk away. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the violence in his words. So I'm asking you now, Binta, not as the man who broke your heart, not as the coward who let you go, but as the father of your child and the man who loves you more than life itself. Will you stand with me? Will you fight with me? Binta looked at the phone in her hand, at the threat that had shattered any illusion of safety she might have had. She looked at Min-soo, wounded and bleeding but standing tall, offering her a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Because the truth was, she'd been part of this world from the moment she fell in love with him, from the moment she'd conceived his child. There was no walking away, no neutral ground. The H-Wang crew had made sure of that. She thought of her son, growing inside her. Thought of the life she wanted for him, one where he didn't have to hide who he was, didn't have to be ashamed of his mixed heritage, didn't have to run. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it together, no more secrets, no more pushing me away to protect me. I'm in this or I'm out, completely. Together, Min-soo agreed. I swear it. Binta took a deep breath and made her choice. Then let's go to your meeting. Let's show your uncle and the H-Wang crew and everyone else exactly what happens when they threaten the Choi family. Min-soo's smile was sharp as a knife. He kissed her, hard and claiming, tasting of blood and promise and violence to come. When they broke apart, Young-ho was back with clothes and a wheelchair that Min-soo refused to use. Instead, he leaned on Binta as they walked out of the hospital room, his arm around her shoulders, her hand supporting his waist. They made it halfway down the hall when Binta's phone rang again. She looked at the screen and froze. What? Min-soo asked. What is it? The number was from Senegal. From her mother, who she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, who disowned her for moving to Korea and marrying a foreign criminal. With shaking hands, Binta answered. Hello. Binta, her mother's voice was thick with tears. You need to come home, your father. There's been an accident. He's asking for you. The doctors say he only has days left. The world tilted. Binta felt Min-soo's grip tighten on her, the only thing keeping her upright. I can't, she stammered. I'm pregnant, I'm in Seoul, Please, her mother begged. Whatever happened between us, put it aside. He's dying, Binta. He wants to meet his grandson. He wants to make things right before. She broke off, sobbing. Binta looked at Min-soo, saw the concern in his eyes. I'll call you back, she told her mother and hung up. What's wrong? Min-soo demanded. My father, he's dying in Senegal. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to process. I have to go, I have to see him. Now, Binta, you're 7 months pregnant. You can't fly halfway across the world. And the H-Wang crew is threatening my baby in Korea while my father is dying in Africa, Binta finished, hysteria creeping into her voice. What am I supposed to do, Min-soo? What do I choose? Before he could answer, an explosion rocked the hospital. The windows shattered inward, showering them with glass. Min-soo threw himself over Binta, taking her to the ground as the world erupted into chaos around them. Screams filled the air, alarms blared, and through the smoke pouring in from the parking garage, Binta heard gunfire. Lots of gunfire. They're here, Young-ho shouted, materializing with a gun in each hand. The H-Wang crew, they're not waiting 24 hours, they're attacking now. Min-soo looked at Binta, blood from his reopened wound soaking through his shirt, and she saw the terrible choice in his eyes. Fight or flee, protect her or protect his family, survive the next 5 minutes or plan for the future. Binta, he said, his voice urgent and afraid in a way she'd never heard. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Can you trust me? She thought of her father dying half a world away, thought of the baby kicking inside her, thought of the men with guns coming to kill them both. And she realized that whatever choice she made in this moment would determine everything, not just whether they lived or died tonight, but what kind of life their son would have if they survived. Yes, she whispered. I trust you. Min-soo nodded once, then looked at Young-ho. Get her out of here. Use the service elevator. Get her to the safe house in Buckhanson. And you? Young-ho asked. Min-soo picked up one of Young-ho's guns, checking the clip with practiced ease despite his wound. I'm going to remind the H-Wang crew why you don't threaten a beak. Min-soo, no, Binta started, but he silenced her with a fierce kiss. Trust me, he said again. I'll come back to you, I promise. Then Young-ho was pulling her away, half carrying her toward the service stairs as more explosions shook the building. Binta looked back once and saw Min-soo standing in the hallway, bloodied and armed, looking like the angel of death itself. The last thing she heard before Young-ho dragged her around the corner was the sound of Min-soo's gun firing, and a scream that was abruptly cut short. Then she was running, her hands cradling her belly, trusting a man she barely knew to protect her, while the man she loved walked into almost certain death. And somewhere in Senegal, her father was dying, asking for the daughter he'd disowned. Everything was falling apart. Everything was burning. And Binta didn't know if any of them would survive to see the dawn. The safe house was a modest apartment in Buckhanson, tucked away in the mountains north of Seoul, where the city lights couldn't quite reach. Young-ho had driven like a man possessed through the pre-dawn streets, constantly checking the rearview mirror for tails while Binta sat in the backseat, her phone clutched in her white-knuckled grip, willing it to ring. It had been 6 hours since the hospital attack, 6 hours of silence from Min-soo. He's alive, Young-ho said for the 4th time as he checked the perimeter of the apartment. If he wasn't, we would have heard by now. The Beek family network is extensive. News travels fast. Or maybe he's lying dead in that hospital, and no one's bothered to tell us yet, Binta said, her voice raw from crying and shouting, and the acrid smoke she'd inhaled during their escape. Young-ho had no answer to that. Binta paced the small living room, one hand supporting her aching back, the other on her belly where her son had been unnaturally quiet for the past hour. The baby always kicked when she was stressed, as if trying to comfort her, but now there was nothing. Just an ominous stillness that terrified her more than the gunfire had. Something's wrong, she said suddenly. With the baby, he's not moving. Young-ho's eyes widened. Should I call a doctor? I can have someone here in. No, Binta forced herself to breathe, to think logically despite the panic clawing at her throat. She pressed harder on her belly, trying to stimulate a response. Not yet. Sometimes Bobbies sleep. Sometimes they're just quiet. I just need. She needed Min-soo. She needed her husband to tell her everything would be okay, to put his hand on her belly and feel their son move and smile that rare, genuine smile he saved only for her. But Min-soo was gone, possibly dead, and Binta was alone in a strange apartment with a bodyguard who looked increasingly uncomfortable with the possibility of having to deliver a baby. Her phone rang. Binta nearly dropped it in her haste to answer, not even checking the caller ID. Min-soo. No, daughter, it's your mother. Binta's heart sank. Mama, I can't talk right now. I'm in the middle of... Your father passed an hour ago. Her mother's voice was flat, emptied of emotion by grief. He held on as long as he could, kept asking for you, but you never came. He died asking why his daughter abandoned him. The words hit like physical blows. Binta sank onto the couch, the room spinning around her. I couldn't. There was an attack. I'm in hiding. Always excuses with you, Binta. Always something more important than family. The bitterness in her mother's voice was acid. You chose that Korean criminal over us, over your own blood, and now your father is dead and you weren't here to say goodbye. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, daughter. You taught me that when you married that man and cut us out of your life, when you stopped calling, stopped writing, when you became too important for your own family. You disowned me, Binta shouted, her composure finally cracking. You told me I was dead to you when I married Min-soo. You said I was a disgrace, that I'd shamed the family by marrying a criminal, by marrying someone who wasn't Senegalese by. And I was right, wasn't I? Her mother's laugh was ugly. Look at you now, hiding in a safe house while people try to kill you, pregnant and alone while your husband does who knows what. This is the life you chose, Binta. This is what you thought was better than us." Each word was a knife, expertly placed to cause maximum damage. Binta wanted to hang up, wanted to scream, wanted to defend her choices. But underneath the anger was a crushing guilt because her mother was right about one thing: she hadn't been there. Her father had died asking for her, and she'd been too caught up in Min-soo's world to say goodbye. "The funeral is in 3 days, her mother said, her voice softening slightly. "If you can tear yourself away from your criminal life for a few hours, we would. Your father would want you here. Whatever happened between us, you were still his daughter. He loved you, even when you broke his heart." Then she hung up, leaving Binta holding a silent phone and drowning in guilt and grief and fear. Young-ho cleared his throat awkwardly. "I'm sorry for your loss." Binta nodded numbly, unable to speak. Her father was dead. The man who'd taught her to read, who'd worked 3 jobs to send her to university in France, who'd danced at her wedding even though he disapproved of the groom, he was gone, and she hadn't been there. The baby kicked suddenly, hard enough to make Binta gasp. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by a sharp, cramping pain in her lower abdomen. "Oh," she said faintly. What's wrong?" Young-ho was on his feet instantly. Another cramp, stronger this time, radiating from her belly down her legs. Binta looked down and saw wetness spreading across the couch beneath her. "What are you saying?" Min-soo asked quietly. "I'm saying that I've been thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind." Baek Junho's eyes settled on the baby. "That child represents the future, whether I like it or not. The world is changing. Korea is changing. The old ways, the old prejudices, they're dying with my generation. If the Baek family doesn't adapt, we'll die too." Binta couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Are you saying you accept us?" "I'm saying I'm willing to consider it, on certain conditions." Of course there were conditions. Which are? First, the vote in 3 days goes forward. But instead of removing Min-soo as my heir, I'll be proposing that we modernize our family structure. Except that the future of the Baeks includes international partnerships, diverse bloodlines, new ways of thinking. "Some of the old guard will never accept that," Min-soo said. "Then they can leave, or be removed." The casual way Baek Junho said it sent chills down Binta's spine. "Second condition, you both prove yourselves. Min-soo, you finish what you started with the Hwang crew. Hunt down every last member, every ally, everyone who thought they could attack a Baek and live to tell about it. Consider it done. And you," Baek Junho turned to Binta, "you prove that you're more than just a liability. You prove that you can be an asset to this family. Your international connections, your education, your perspective as an outsider, you use all of it to help us expand our operations. Make yourself indispensable." Binta's mind raced. He was offering her a devil's bargain, acceptance in exchange for becoming part of the very criminal enterprise she'd always hated. But what choice did she have? The alternative was running forever, raising her son in constant fear. "And the third condition?" Min-soo asked. "You go to Senegal, you bury your wife's father with honor, you meet her family and make peace with them, because if this family is going to evolve, we need to show that we value all our members, not just the Korean ones." Baek Junho's expression softened slightly. "I lost my own parents young. I know what it's like to have regrets about family. Don't let your son grow up with those same regrets." Binta felt tears pricking her eyes. It was the last thing she'd expected from this hard, ruthless man. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. "It can't just be about legacy." Baek Junho was quiet for a long moment. "Because I saw something today that I haven't seen in a very long time. When that gun was pointed at you, when you stepped forward and told them they'd have to kill you before you'd watch Min-soo grovel, that was real. That was the kind of loyalty, the kind of love, that this family was built on generations ago before we forgot what it meant." He stood, walking to the window that overlooked the Seoul skyline. "I've spent my life building power, accumulating wealth, making the Baek name feared across Korea. But I've never had what you two have. And I'm old enough now to recognize that maybe I was wrong about what matters." Min-soo reached for Binta's hand, squeezing it gently. Their baby stirred in her arms, making small sounds in his sleep. "We accept your conditions," Min-soo said. "All of them." Baek Junho nodded. "Good, then let's begin planning. You have 3 days before the vote and a lot of work to do." As they left the study, Binta finally felt like she could breathe. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about this life would ever be perfect. But it was a chance. A real chance for them to build a family, to make a life, to give their son a future. "We should name him," she said as they walked down the hallway. "Our son deserves a name." Min-soo smiled, his first real smile since the chaos began. "What did you have in mind?" "Mamadou," Binta said, "after my father for his Korean name." She looked at Min-soo. "Yi-sung," Min-soo said quietly. "Yi for inheritance, Sung for success. Mamadou Yi-sung Choi." "It's perfect." They stood in the hallway, looking down at their sleeping son, and for one moment, everything was right with the world. Then Binta's phone rang, an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Hello." "Mrs. Choi, this is Detective Park from the Seoul Metropolitan Police. We need you to come down to the station to answer some questions about the incidents last night. The hospital attack, the convoy ambush. We have witnesses placing you at both scenes." Binta's blood ran cold. She looked at Min-soo, saw her own fear reflected in his eyes. When do you need me?" "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Don't be late, and Mrs. Choi, don't try to leave the country. We've flagged your passport." The line went dead. Binta stared at her phone, the weight of her son suddenly feeling heavier. "They know. The police know everything." "We'll handle it," Min-soo said, but she could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "We'll get lawyers, we'll." "What if we can't handle it? What if I go to prison? What if they take Mamadou away?" "They won't. I won't let them." But even as Min-soo said it, Binta could see the doubt in his eyes. Because for all his power, for all the Baek family's influence, they couldn't control everything. And if the police had enough evidence, if they wanted to make an example of the foreign woman married to a crime boss. "We're running out of time," she whispered. "The funeral is in 3 days, the vote is in 3 days, and now the police want me tomorrow. It's all falling apart." Min-soo pulled her close, careful of the baby between them. "Then we'll put it back together. We've survived everything else. We'll survive this too." Binta wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that love really could conquer all, that they could build a life together despite everything stacked against them. But as she stood in that hallway, holding her premature son who might still have medical complications, facing police interrogation tomorrow, a crime family vote in 3 days, and her father's funeral half a world away, she couldn't help but wonder. What if they couldn't survive this? What if the price of loving Min-soo was everything she had left to lose? And what kind of life would their son have if they failed? She looked down at Mamadou's tiny face, so peaceful in sleep, so unaware of the chaos surrounding him. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "we protect him. No matter what we have to do, no matter what we have to sacrifice, we protect our son." "Always," Min-soo promised. But as they walked toward an uncertain future, Binta couldn't shake the feeling that their hardest choices were still ahead of them. And somewhere in the shadows, watching everything, calculating their next move, were forces they hadn't even begun to understand.